All right, one more administrative note that I was being just made aware of as we are basically figuring this out as we go along. Do not sit in the middle. This is the exit row kind of thing situation from airplanes. You know, like if you are seated in an exit row, which is the middle, don't, okay? Moving swiftly on. Also, sorry to interrupt the live stream from the main stage. I hope that I'll make it worthwhile. Also, I personally, while I actually support that, you should not just get up and move around stages with other speakers, I'm fine with that. I know I can be boring, so just bugger off. Right, so who am I? Well, my name is Martin Splitt, as I have been introduced. I work as the head of engineering in a small company, tiny small company of 15, 16 people in Zurich, in Switzerland, called Archeologic. And this is a 3D model of, well, we didn't know how it's going to look like, so we had a guess at how the venue is probably going to look like. So this is the conference venue. It works in your browser, on your phone, or on your tablet, or on your computer. And we have like a little VR goggle here. So we are doing WebVR as well, primarily for architecture, but you can do other things. Like a colleague of mine built a racing game. Who here has ever played Micro Machines? Hands up. You can play that on the web today using Archeologic. Just go to spaces.archeologic.com and check out our blog. Not now. Please listen to me now. Okay, lost half of the audience to Micro Machines. I'm a Google developer expert. I am a Mozilla contributor, W3C contributor, wrote a book, yada, yada, yada. So I actually have to have been playing around with the web since a decade around-ish. Yeah, I'm a little more than 10 years. And what I really enjoy about the web is that this is a platform that is very inclusive. If you have a really old Windows 98 computer, you can still technically, theoretically experience the web. Well, to a certain degree, right? The website, the first, very first website from CERN is still available. So it's a very open, very interesting platform, rather than building, for instance, Android apps, which is limited to the Android audience. You're losing your friends with iOS and other operating systems. And that brings me to an interesting thing, because so far we have been talking about application platforms. Like, you had probably started with a Windows or Mac computer, so that was one of the application platforms. If you had a Windows computer, if you were the kid in school back in the days that had a Mac computer, you heard all the other people talking about the cool games they are playing, and you're like, right? Now it's kind of the other way around. The people with Windows computers are like, oh, you're still having a Windows computer. Aha. Right? So it's Mac all over the place, apparently. If you were like me and had a Linux computer, you were kind of like out of both worlds, really. So then the web came, and web became more an application platform than a document platform, because originally it has been designed in CERN, in Geneva, actually, by Sir Tim Berners-Lee, to host documents and link them and share them. So you don't have to install any other software than a browser to actually get knowledge from documents from other people. And these documents can be linked to other documents, so you don't have to go to another library, get that document from somewhere, print it out, and then go back to your computer or workstation to research further. You could literally just click or tap a link and then actually get that document right away. But it has evolved into an application platform. So we are now who here is using a webmail solution? Okay, who here is just checking emails and goes like whatever that guy says? Okay, at least no one's raising hands for that. That would be weird, wouldn't it? Like, yes, I'm not listening to you. That's absurd. Right, so we have applications on the web that we are using more or less daily. Facebook could count as an application. Twitter, WhatsApp can be used via a web application. That is super weird. Yeah, Google Mail, all that kind of stuff, we do it on the web. There's photo image editing services on the web. There's pretty much everything exists in a version on the web. Spotify, all that kind of stuff. But now we have VR. And if we look back at the app ecosystem or the app platform world, it kind of has evolved from I had to go to a physical store, get a CD-ROM or floppy disk, depending on how old you are. Who here has ever bought a floppy disk? Ah, thanks God, I'm not an old grumpy guy standing on stage talking about VR. No. So yeah, you had to buy a floppy disk from somewhere and then put it into your computer. Then it went, and then it installed and it's insert disk 2 of 19, and you would kind of do the whole dance. At some point, we just had one CD-ROM. We put it in. Hurrah! We have an installation going on, and then there we go. play a game or something. And then that moved towards, okay, we download a thing. Who here has used dial-up connections? Yeah. Who here has been on the computer during the night because it was faster? Yeah, right? It's like kids these days go, what? They're like, yeah, it was faster because there were fewer people on the internet. It's like, eh? So yeah, so you basically sat on your computer during the night, downloading a thing to run it on your computer. And that to me is like, that's the 90s in a nutshell. Like you download things, install them, and then hurrah. And then we had web apps, and we don't have to install anything. You just type in the URL, and whoa, off you go. No more disk 10 of 19. That was really cool. But then mobile came along. And somehow people went, this is a really good user experience. I'm like, what? Have you been in the 90s when we did the same thing and it was shit, and now it's fine to download something that is 100 megabytes only to find that it doesn't work and then uninstall it again? I don't want to do that. And with VR, we are doing the exact same thing all over again. So now it doesn't matter if you're using Oculus, if you're using Samsung Gear Home or whatever it's called, Oculus Home, I think it's also called on the Gear VR, or if you're using Vive and Steam, you're downloading a thing, installing it on your computer or mobile phone, and then run it in VR. I'm not very excited about that one, to be honest. What I want to do is I want to basically just go like, yeah, I click on the thing, I go into VR, I'm like, no, this is shit. And then I go to the next thing, and yeah, this is it. And then I spend the rest of the day and forget to eat and, you know, all the things your parents told you not to do. So that's VR, for me at least, or that's how it should be. However, the landscape looks a bit different. We're having very different devices and very different ecosystems that are not necessarily connected to each other. There are, for instance, these lovely specimens. So we have the Oculus, we have the HTC Oculus Rift, we have the HTC Vive, we have the Samsung Gear VR, which is more or less attached to the Oculus ecosystem, so it's kind of like the same thing, but mobile and stationary. We have Daydream and Cardboard, and then we have like others like Console VR. And they have very different capabilities. With an Oculus Rift, you can move around in the room, as well as with the HTC Vive. You also have like touch controller, or you can have touch controllers, so you can use your hands to interact with things, and you can walk around in virtual reality. However, you have to set that up, and that setup process is not very mobile friendly, because you are literally, for the Vive, for instance, you have like these lighthouse controllers, so you have to put them to walls opposing each other so they can see each other. A few people actually travel with this kind of stuff, and they have like photo stands, like tripods, and I'm like, what the hell? So they're like, what are you doing? Are you a musician or something? No, I'm demoing VR. What? It's not really mobile, it's not made for that, but it's really high quality experiences because you have your hands, you have the possibility to walk around, but you also need a high-end computer for that. So a computer from, let's say, a gaming computer, an expensive gaming computer from 2 years ago is probably not strong enough to run or even install the software you have to install to run VR on your computer, so you have to buy a new one. I think the price is approximately 800 euros of the computer you need and around 500, 700 euros for the VR hardware. I don't know about you guys. I mean, I'm from Switzerland, sure, but still, that's quite a bit of money in my books. So you might want to go for a more mobile variation of that because you are, well, more mobile with it. The experience is still pretty good. So you buy a Samsung phone, or you have a Samsung phone, happens to be, and I think it's 99 euros, the Gear VR, for instance, and then you're set, and then you get a controller as well, which is probably like 20 euros, I don't even know, and then you're okay, but that comes as a price as well, because the phone does not know where in the room you are. So when I do a step to the side, the VR hardware does not know. It tries to emulate it a bit, so you can move a little bit, like a few centimeters, but I can't go, I'm not going to go over here, because the device goes, what? I don't know. I have no idea that you walked over there. And the same goes for the other mobile solutions as well. So the Cardboard has that problem. The Daydream device has that problem. So you're losing that capability, right? So also, these mobile devices do not have the same capabilities in terms of inputs and controls. So in VR, you're basically a set of floating eyeballs. So you're floating around space and have a good time. But if you look down, everyone basically looks down at their hands and go, where are my hands? Which is a natural thing, because if I look down, I see my hands, and I expect that to be the case in VR, but no, unless you have additional hardware. So on mobile, we have even less possibilities because we don't have these like the hand controllers. But what we get is, for the Daydream, we get like a pointy device, and I think the Gear VR has it as well now. Or you use a gamepad, that's also a possibility, but yeah, it's not quite the same thing. And for the cardboard, we have a button. We have a single button. Because what it does is it simulates that a piece of your finger, like basically has a little foil in the front of it, and that pretends to be your finger and touches the screen when you press the button. That's all it does. So it's a mouse click, basically. That's the maximum interaction that you can get with the cardboard. Well, now, why should we care about these differences? I mean, obviously, we're building our applications for the HTC Vive or the Oculus Rift because they are like the best that we can get, right? Well, let's look at the sales numbers from 2016. So the Oculus sells at a little less than 400,000. The HTC Vive sells at a little more than 400,000 units. And then there's PlayStation VR, and that sells at roughly 700,000, 750,000 units. Wow, okay, so that's a bit of a difference there. But you know what? Mobile outsells them by far. We have approximately 2.2 million Gear VR devices out there. So if you're building for this, that's okay, but holy moly, you're missing out on a large piece of the market. And if we count in cardboards, well, we are at a whopping 88 million devices out there. You don't want to get these 88 million people in? No? You don't care? You can afford to go for the small? Like, yes, I'm designing for this, and I'll be in the majority of the market. Yeah, no. And just to remind you, right, we all remember that Facebook invested, what, $2 billion into Oculus and built a VR device, and then Google went $5. Well, but I can't even fit it back in. See, it's not really good quality though. So that's the thing that we have to deal with, and it's not a bad thing either. I mean, obviously, you don't really have that many input possibilities, but you can definitely make something of it. So what I wanted to point at is VR landscape is very, very fragmented, and you should not assume that you have a certain device. Also, if you're just building for the cardboard, and I have an HTC Vive at home, and I'm like, why can't I have my hands here, I can't do anything with them, what is wrong with you? So you should actually figure out a way to adapt to the capabilities you're facing. And if we think back, fragmentation, different capabilities, adapting to something. Does the term, who here has heard the term responsive web design before? I'm very nervous that a lot of people do not raise their hands right now. You might want to go to the internet and Google responsive web design because it's kind of an important thing. But anyway, so we have to deal with this. We have to adapt to this rather than saying, I exclude all these people because they have crap hardware, or I exclude all of these people because they are super rich and have this weird hardware that I don't care to actually support. So we have to adapt. We have to be responsive. Also, mobile VR is very obviously much bigger than desktop VR, which I did not like. Okay, sure. In hindsight, everyone can be like, of course, but I didn't think that. I'm like, why would I use mobile VR if I can have a better experience? I'll be honest, I use the cardboard and the Daydream a lot more often than the HTC Vive that I have in the office available. Also, cardboards are basically the winners of that so far because they are basically everywhere and everyone gave them out. New York Times gave them for free to their subscribers. So that gave them a gigantic boost a couple of years ago. Right, so cool, yes, blah, 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 have to adapt, sales, yada, yada, the fragmented ecosystem, nah. Why do I even care about VR? I'm a web developer, I don't give a shit. I make websites, and they might look good on mobile, I didn't test. Why should you care about VR? Well, VR has a few really, really amazing use cases. I like one of them, amongst them, is to actually entertain yourself, like games and stuff. But I don't think that's one of the most interesting, because games are actually kind of tedious to experience. Like, they're super exciting, but in a boring, tedious way. Because you know, I don't know, if I have to walk around all day already, and then I want to sit down and just experience something really quick, and I can't really, because I have to get the headset on and then start the application, and then 20 minutes later I have to walk around again. I'm like, right? Also, actually, storytelling in VR is a bit tricky because you don't know anymore where if you're shooting a movie, you know exactly what's the viewport, right? What is the audience seeing? I can make like composition and stuff around that, because I know that the audience sees this part of my scene, what is happening there. But in VR, you don't know, because you might be thinking people are looking in that way, but actually they go like, oh, what is that bird over there? And then they're missing out a key part of your story that happens over there. It's like, it's a bit tricky. But what makes VR really, really amazing is, as it is a virtual reality, it is kind of like reality without the constraints. It's a green field, very literally green field, as in there's nothing. There's no physics, there's no boundaries, there's no such thing as any like material limitations. It's not that you have to have physical materials that you have to get first and then start building something. You can start from scratch and build anything. Like, look at that, right? Like flowers and volcanoes, and you can even, in Tiltbrush, you have the possibility to draw with music, so you have paint that reacts to music, and you have water, and I could like build a waterfall and stuff like that from scratch, and there's nothing holding me back. I can create things that can never exist in reality, because it is virtual and there's no limits. The limits that we are having are the limits that we are giving ourselves. And obviously the real space is a bit of a limit, right? If I have like a 3 by 3 meters stage, then I can't expect the user to walk 10 meters to the left. So creating is one of the amazing things, and that's something that touches a lot of people, because everyone here and everyone out there is a creator. It depends on what they create, but everyone is a creator. We are all creating things. It just depends on what kind of things we are creating. And that's really cool. And the thing is, you also want to share these things, and they can be really impressive, but that's a bit of a problem. If you do it for something that is limited to one part of the ecosystem, if I'm creating something and I want to show it to you, and I'm like, here it is, and then you go like, I don't have an HTC Vive, or I don't have an Oculus Rift. That's sad. I don't want that to happen. Of course I can do a screenshot, but it's not the same thing. Then why did I even bother making it 3D? I could just draw on a picture. The other interesting use case is experiencing things that I can't experience. I don't know about you, but I don't know if I really wanted to do that in physical reality, but in virtual reality it's hella cool. So this is Google Earth, and it allows you to basically Spider-Man-like shoot a ray somewhere and then just drag you there, and you can like fly through to downtown Manhattan and stuff like that. That's really cool. Or other experiences such as, and that's actually something that is a personal story that really touches me. I have a relative who suffers severe social anxiety. So that means that he does not like to be where other people are. We've all been there, right? But for him, it's a pathological condition, so he can't travel. And I travel quite a bit, and I enjoy it, and I want to basically let him participate. Now, he can't really participate physically, as that goes very strong against his condition. But what he can do is he can participate virtually. So far, that has been videos and pictures, but it's not the same. It's not the same thing as standing somewhere, right? So a picture is very nice, but it gives you this one tiny part of the whole picture, even if it's on the stage, right? If I take a picture now, I might get like half of the audience in the picture and like, look at that, and he's like, I don't know. Also, we are really bad at judging spaces. Depending on how I take the picture, if I take the picture like that, it looks like super gigantic. If I take it like that, then it looks like it's tiny and crowded. I mean, it is crowded, but it looks tinier than it actually is. So pictures don't really represent that well. Videos also not really that well, because basically I get to decide what he sees, and the things that I care about might not be the things that he cares about. So instead, what I could do is I could do a 360 movie, or a 360 picture at least. And then I actually tried that out, and I gave him a cardboard and my old phone, and a 360-degree picture of one of the I say mountain, but Swiss people get super angry about it, so let's call it a hill. I went on the top of the hill, and I took a 360-degree, like in all directions, and I gave it to him. Like I showed him pictures, and he's like, "Oh yeah, that looks nice." And then I gave him the cardboard with the photosphere, it's called, installed. And he spent 20 minutes just looking around, and he's like super amazed because it's an experience he can't have, or he chooses not to have physically. But that does not mean that he can't experience it in an emotional way. So VR experiences are much, much more emotional, much more direct than any two-dimensional or even three-dimensional through a two-dimensional medium can ever be. So experiencing things is amazing in VR, and that's a great use case. But again, if we are looking at the fragmented ecosystem, it would not be very nice if we would basically keep people out based on what devices they have and what devices they can afford. So I think that also should be made available for a broader audience. And now my clicker has died. Oh no, it's back again. Sweet. So basically what makes VR amazing is, for these two use cases at least, is it's a much more intuitive interface. Even the simplest form, even the cardboard, the intuitive interface is I look around, which is something, if I want to orient myself in a space, I look around. It's the natural thing to do in this situation. So it's a very intuitive interface there. Also, we are three-dimensional beings. We perceive the world as a three-dimensional space. So if you have spatial data, rooms, sites, whatever, like anything that is spatial, space, obviously, a car, anything that is three-dimensional is spatial data. And we're really, really bad at, or maybe some of us are better at it than others, but we are not very good at seeing two-dimensional representations of space and make judgments on it. If you looked on the floor plan of this venue, it might not look as big as it actually is when you're walking through it with all the people. And actually, I created a 3D model of the space, as you've seen in the first slide. And walking through, like literally virtually walking through that, holy crap, that was a bit of a walk. I didn't expect it. I'm like, yeah, 9,000 square meters, what does that even mean? Also, we are really bad at numbers, right? If you're looking at numbers, it's like, if someone kills someone else, you're like, yeah, bad guy, go to prison, end of story. Kills 3 people, yeah, bad guy, go to prison, end of story. Kills 100 people, whoa, something's wrong with that person. Kills 10,000 people, and like there's all these injustice happening in the world right now. There's wars going on in the world right now. Are you even aware of that? And when we hear the numbers, 20,000 people died, we are almost going, what does that mean? We can't relate to large numbers. Also, write your politician to fucking fight wars, just saying. Because like, we should fix this diplomatically rather than violently. Anyway, so yeah, natural interpretation of spatial data, and also sharing and collaborating. That's another thing that VR is really good at. So if we have a possibility, for instance, architects suffer from this problem for ages, and they haven't been able to fix that because the cost of devices were so high. So basically, it's more or less like software engineering. You know that in software engineering, fixing or finding bugs early on in the process, optimally when we specify things or think about things, it's super cheap to fix that because we just fix our idea of how we solve that problem and the bug is gone before it was even codified, right? But when we discover a fundamental bug, once we have shipped to a lot of users who never update their software, Windows, Internet Explorer, Safari, then it's really, really hard to retract that and get that bug out of the world, eradicate it. So basically, architects have the same problem. If you find the problem with a building that you just drew on paper, you just take an eraser, erase that line, and draw something else, and fixed. If you have a concrete wall there, and people live on the other side of that wall, it gets a little more expensive and a little more tricky to make that happen. So they're interested in actually figuring these things out early on. But the problem is they're drawing floor plans, and not everyone understands floor plans. And that's by definition so, because it's a professional tool from architects. And the problem then is that how am I supposed, as the person living in that space later on, how am I supposed to figure out that there is a problem? How do I figure, like looking at a floor plan, how do I know that the room is too dark? I don't. There's a line, there's another line, and I'm like, what is that line? And the window, aha. Okay, good, I guess the house has windows, check, right? But I don't understand that it's to the north side and it's really dark because there's like lots of trees around. So I don't see that. But in virtual reality, or even just 3D really, but the more I can experience this, the easier it is to catch. So if I'm standing in that room and I go like, it's a bit dark, isn't it? Does it get brighter? And then the architect goes, actually no, because that's the brightest it gets. Then you're like, maybe, how about a window there or something? Or we use this room differently and make it smaller or something like that. You can give meaningful input to the architect, which is the equivalent of meaningful input in the software development process. It doesn't help if your client goes, make it more juicy. It's like, what? It's a website. It doesn't get juicy by definition. It's not a fruit, goddammit, and not a chewing gum. But if the client says, I don't like this color because in our culture it means death, then you're like, I can work with that. So what color means good things in your culture then? So yeah, you want to collaborate and share experiences, but also that is limited by the fragmentation of the ecosystem. And because it is limited by the fragmentation of the ecosystem, it would be really cool to have a platform that is not, it's fragmented, but it still is inclusive to everyone who wants to participate. And as it happens, we have this platform, and it's called the web. Surprise! Right? I mean, who here has a browser? Point proven. Next question. So, what WebVR tries to do is, WebVR brings VR device information and VR device support, well, to the web. Surprise. And the thing is now, a lot of people have struggled with getting started with it because it seems very complicated and very frightening. And I'd like to debunk that because it's not complicated and not frightening at all, I think. At least that's what I think. So, can you all read this? Who here cannot read this? Hands up, please. Wow, you have really good eyes. Or you lie, or you don't care. You're like, yeah, whatever that guy says. Can I make it a little larger, maybe? Yes, okay. Sweet, so here we have a website. It's a website, it's not a special thing, right? I can just go H1, hello, we are developers. And then I can go to my browser, not that browser, the other browser. Well, I'll take that browser. I take whatever I can get. And go to localhost 8000, which is where it should be running. And there we go. We have a white page with an absolutely ugly screen text saying, hello, we are developers. But what I can also do is, I have loaded a library from Mozilla called A-Frame. And A-Frame is there to allow you to build 3D applications or 3D content on the web that is responsive to what the user has available and also supports VR. It's actually basically tailored towards VR. And what I can do is I can do things like, I want a box of a certain size, let's say, well, actually, let's just make it 1 by 1 meter. And I position that box. And now, so I have a 3-dimensional stage, basically, and I have my camera. So if you are my camera, you're looking that direction. And then we have like the X, Y, and Z coordinates. The X coordinate goes like this and this. And then we have the Y coordinates that go up, like down and up. And then we have the Z coordinate, which comes closer to you or goes further away from you. Negative values usually go away from you. So I can say, I don't want to move it to the left or to the right, but I want to move it, I don't know, 5 meters into the screen. And maybe I want to give it a color, I don't know, red. And if I'm now refreshing my page, and if I have not made a syntax mistake, there we go. We have a little box of 1 by 1 by 1 meter. It stands on the ground. I'm not sitting on the ground, so it's below me, and I look on top of it. So I think the standard height of the user is 1.6 meters. So I can move it up a bit. Actually, there we go. It's right in front of me now. That's all nice and fine. But they also have an inspector. So with a press of a few buttons, I get this wonderful thing that looks, who here has done 3D editing before? Hands up. Oh, a few people. I'm very sorry for you, because I had to do it as well, and I'm like, it can be complicated. This one is not as complicated. So here I have a representation of the scene. So here I have my camera, for instance. Here I have my box. And then I can move my box around. I can move it a bit here, and I can move it a bit up. And then I can say back to the scene, and here we go. It has moved. Surprise, right? I can also go, you know what, that's a bit boring. I want more things to be here. I want to add something, and I want to give it a geometry of I don't know, sphere. Let's say sphere. So it's a sphere. I can then probably, can I position it? I can position it to be at -5 as well. And here we are, here's my sphere. I can move it around a bit. I don't know if color is a component actually, or materials might probably, yes, I know. And so you can build these things here, and it's really easy to do so. And I can pick another color, I can make it green, for instance. Then I can go back to the scene, and voila, my scene is here, right? So it's not that complicated. I can even like import things from other spaces. So for instance, I can say I have assets. So if you have a 3D modeler ready, that's really nice, because what you can do is you can do a asset item, IDs, building, and I think it's source, I'm not sure. I would have to check, I don't know. Model export, oh, conveniently I pressed the wrong buttons though. /export gltf. So I'm loading a file that has been created in our tool. And then I can say a entity gltf model equals building. I save that. I refresh. Now obviously because I refreshed, all the other things are gone, but the 3D model appears, right? So I have just loaded a 3D model, and I can walk around in that 3D model. I can literally do that. I can turn around and go like, oh, look at that, there's my box. And I could also experience this in VR if I would have more time, but I don't have that much time. And also this also integrates nicely within, so here you see the model from the inspector, so it's here, I can edit it as well. I can also, it looks a bit blank around it, so I can do like a sky, source, summit, JPEG for instance. And I go back and I refresh. And now it loads for a while, and there we go. Now we have a sky, like a proper sky around it. And if I go over the, whoa, my God, I'm gonna die if I fall down. Anyway, so yeah, that's WebVR. Like, this is VR ready. You can take it into your cardboard and explore it in VR. That's it. That wasn't hard, right? So I really encourage you to try it out. A-Frame is amazing. Amazing. And so the cool thing about WebVR is it's available on so many devices and platforms. It's not fragmented as the other platform parts are. And when I say that, I mean these are the browsers that support it right now. Samsung Internet, if you have never seen it before, Carmel, which is the Oculus browser, and the one, my favorite is Servo, which is the experimental version of a new browser engine from Mozilla that also supports it. So all of these browsers support it. There's polyfills as well for the other browsers. So that's a possibility. And it is being spec'd, it's being standardized by Mozilla, Firefox, Microsoft, Samsung, Facebook. All these people are in there and working together. So definitely check it out. Go to webvr.info, for instance, and talk to them. If you see something in the spec that you don't understand, ask them to clarify, for instance. And there's a gigantic community and lots of tooling. I mean, we've seen A-Frame. That's one of the many tools. There's other tools available as well. Definitely check it out. It's amazing. Also, it's really easy to create and share, as we have seen. And there's a few challenges still. For instance, input. You would think that hand input is really natural, but it's not. And it might be frustrating. So go to the lowest common denominator, for instance, using like the gaze, where people are looking at. There's like gamepads, VR controllers if available. There's leap motions, that is the hands bit, that might or might not be a good idea. You can also measure like electricity in your muscles and then use that to get arm poses, or use a Kinect to figure out where in space you are. You could probably make a position-aware cardboard. Locomotion is a problem, so how do I move from place 1 to place 2? So here's an interesting experiment for that. You throw the ball, you have a second one, and then you go poof, and you're there. That works not that well for cardboards, obviously. Presence, highly recommend the Google VR session on at Google I/O last year. So they basically faked all this. You don't know where the eyes are looking, but with some heuristics, you can make it look like you know. And now, to close it up, as I think I'm running over my time, Steve Jobs famously said, like, the computer is the bicycle for our minds, because the bicycle is what makes the human much, much more efficient than every other animal out there. And if the computer is the bicycle for our minds that gives us powers to do things that we can't do without it, then VR is the teleporter that allows us to experience and see things that we can't see in reality. Thank you very much.
Is it working? Yeah.